Welcome. My name is Katie Taylor. I'm the Vice Chair of the Agile Business Consortium. Consortium's been around for over 25 years now and is the professional body for business agility. And we're hosting a series of events during February as part of the wider Agile20Reflect Festival. So I'm particularly pleased that we're bringing you Jamie's presentation today, as the Consortium and VisionLed have actually been working really closely on a framework that brings together a range of different business agility concepts in a more coherent and consistent way. It's the tangible how-to aspects that are based on experience that help to kind of make sense of what is often a confusing topic. So really, without further ado, let me hand over to Jamie, who I'm sure will explain more.
Thank you very much, Katie. Can you all hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, okay, very good. So I am in a sunny place, although it's nighttime here. I'm in Singapore. So it's, what time is it now? 6 p.m. for me. All right, let's get stuck in. So today's session, we're going to be talking about business agility, hence the title. And as Katie said, yeah, there's a partnership between Agile Business Consortium and APMG and ourselves to bring this business agility framework to the world. About myself, I am UK born Kiwi, so I'm half English and half New Zealander. But I've been living in Singapore since 2008. I'm from Warrington. Probably doesn't sound like it by now, but I've been away a long time. So I run a consulting and training business in Singapore. And we've been teaching business agility for about 4 years, since 2017, with our local partner, who's the National University of Singapore. So we've come from the traditional kind of agile setting, agile background, which is, you know, from the IT setting and following it through from agile software development into Devops, from Devops into whole high velocity IT, and then beyond IT into business agility. So the framework that we have and what I'm going to explain over the next 45 minutes to an hour is up for you to freely use and view on the website that you can see in front of you. So that businessagility.works, .works is one of the new domains like .com. So businessagility.works, and you'll be able to see the framework in more detail. So we've got 4 topics and a Q&A session at the very end. So we'll talk about some of the history and evolution. How did business agility come to the world? Why do we need it? We'll talk about some common challenges that are quite apparent for those that have come from, you know, the software agility background and have tried to even convince IT to be agile as a whole. Then we can foresee the challenges that we face when we try to make the whole business agile. Then we'll talk about the businessagility.works framework and how that is designed around those particular challenges. And then a little bit on the implementation steps. So the first on history and evolution. Now, there's a little bit of research when you research various practices. These dates are often conflicting. Even on Wikipedia, you can Google Deming and you can Google Plan, Do, Check, Act, and you'll come up with different dates. So we're not so fixated on the dates of the particular timeline, but just more that it's an evolution and that each, you know, practice, good practice or best practice, you know, depending on the era, solves a problem, right? So it's designed around a specific problem. And then once that problem is solved, a different problem arises, and then hence there's an evolution, right? So we go from one to the other. So scientific management made sense back in the early 1900s. From that evolved Plan, Do, Study, Act and Plan, Do, Check, Act, etc. So we kind of summarize all of those into 4 basic phases. There's the manufacturing origins, which is where a lot of these practices now get bundled under one banner of lean or lean thinking. And then in the late 1990s, even though it started much earlier, but in the late 1990s, Agile software development frameworks started popping up, started competing before they came together in 2001 with the Agile Manifesto, which we know. With Agile software development, it solves a problem, right? It solves the problem of the business waiting for the development of new applications. And then in the late 90s, this is all Web 1.0 kind of stuff. We're not on the web. We need to be on the web. Software development, why are you so slow? And so Agile practices solve that particular problem. Then a new problem arises. Just because software development is now faster doesn't mean that IT is faster, because IT is not just software development. And so after the evolution of Agile software development, we then had DevOps. So we've got development and operations trying to work together. And then into business agility, which again started earlier than we've put there, around 2015, but really got cemented in people's minds in 2015, and I'll explain why. And what you're seeing on the slide there is an example of a bottleneck. And the bottleneck of IT shared services was by design. So IT was designed to be slow, not on purpose. IT was designed to be low cost, but everything in life has a positive and a negative, or a plus and a minus, a pro and a con. When you design for low cost, you can expect slow speed as a result. So they go hand in hand. So IT was an obvious bottleneck in the late 90s, maybe even today in some companies, but certainly in the late 90s, because it was designed around shared services. ITIL was the main framework, right? Giving all this good guidance. ITIL was based on lean. And so we're looking at how we can run a lean IT department for the lowest cost possible. Why does IT need to be low cost? Because IT is not profit making. So any part of the business that doesn't make money, you should optimize for low cost. And not just picking on IT shared services, but also finance would have looked like this, HR would have looked like this, and any real back office function that is shared and doesn't directly drive profit would look like this. So you would have the business makes a request, IT or finance or HR doesn't have the resources to deal with all the requests. So what do? We implement a queuing system, right? Log a ticket. You log a ticket, you wait in the queue. When it's your turn, then we will process your work. And this was by design. So was IT a bottleneck? Yes, absolutely right. IT was a bottleneck. However, it was by design. When you design for low cost, this is what's going to result. The end of the 90s, all the companies wanted to be online. They all wanted a website. So there's a lot of pressure on the first part of IT, especially from a business perspective. And that first part of IT is development. And so Agile software development practices are born, right? Our DSDMs, our Scrums, our XPs, our Crystals, etc. And this increases the throughput, the speed of IT dev. So within that little bubble of IT development, we can see that we are executing work much faster than we were before. We are building things, we're testing things, but we're not deploying things, because deploying is someone else's job. So Agile software development had the positive, which was it did help to speed up IT development. The downside, though, and everything has a downside, was that Agile software development caused a split in IT, caused a divergence. You have one part of IT which is designed for speed. You have another part of IT which is designed to be cheap. Now, IT development is pumping more and more and more and more updates, more and more apps. Ops, still designed for low cost, they're still saying the same thing as they were before. Enter the queue, log a ticket, wait your turn. Right? And this was very, very normal in the 2000 to 2010 timeframe. So one problem solved, a new problem emerges. So what was the solution? Around 2009, 2010, we had Devops. All right, so Devops, now the combination of development and operations working together under one common goal. That common goal is putting working code into production as fast as possible, right, and maintaining quality, etc. So now IT solves the bottleneck problem, but what can you see now? So IT was the bottleneck. Then the bottleneck shifted to operations, IT operations. So we solved that one. Now, where's the bottleneck now? Somewhere else. So this is the logic behind why business agility evolved from the movements within IT. The first movement within Agile space was with development, right, around late 90s and 2001 with the manifesto. That solved a problem, created a new one. So DevOps was born. That solved the problem, created a new one. And so business agility is born. So business agility is designed to optimize the whole thing from the customer to the customer. The trendy term used for this nowadays is value streams, right? From the customer to the customer. So this is the context in which business agility fits into as an evolution from agile software development that evolved into DevOps. DevOps evolved into business agility. And we're chasing bottlenecks at the end of the day. Now, if every company has the same kind of issue here with bottlenecks, we may think, well, what's the point? You know, why can't we just accept reality? We have bottlenecks. Why do we have to keep chasing them and optimizing them? What's the whole point of it? Well, around 2015, there was a very interesting quote that got posted on the internet from a very influential person who you can see at the bottom there, who was a gentleman called Klaus Schwab, the chairman of the World Economic Forum. And so he made this quote in 2015. So in the new world, it's not the big fish that eats the small fish, it's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. Now, what is he saying? He's saying a few things that are really important. Number one is that he's talking about new world. So that means there must have been an old world. In the old world, the big fish did eat the small fish. Now, what is he telling you? He's telling you that the big companies would bully the smaller companies. How do they bully them? Through scale. Just by being massive and leveraging economies of scale and playing price wars and buying all the smaller companies before they can grow into a credible threat. So basically, in the old world, the bigger you were, the more protected you were because you own the market or you own a significant part of the market. All right, that's why most countries might have one telco or two telcos, maybe three, but not 100 telcos. Because the bigger you get, you can just buy out the smaller ones or bully the smaller ones out of the market. But in 2015, what Klaus was seeing is this fast fish eating the slow fish. What is he referring to there? He's talking about the evolution of digital technologies, where everything that a business does rests on IT somehow. And it's no longer about necessarily who's the cheapest, because everyone is pretty much the same price. It's more about who gives the customer value faster than the rest. So if you give the customer value faster, then you get a customer. If you tell the customer, I'm sorry, we can't help you now, but we have a project, and in 6 months to 1 year, we can give you what you ask for, the customer will uninstall your app, which is effectively uninstalling your company, and they will move on to someone else. So a very interesting idea, isn't it? That you can spend all of this time and effort to build a company, but if you don't add value to your customer, they will just uninstall your company. So you cannot accept your bottleneck as a reality, even though there will always be a bottleneck somewhere. You can't accept it as a reality simply because your competitor isn't. So in the training industry, no different, right? If we don't come out with courses that are up to date, and we don't come out with them as fast, or at least faster or as fast as our competition, by the time we bring our course to market, everyone's already been trained. So we lose. So this is going to be a true competitive advantage or disadvantage on how quickly you can deliver value to your customer, because they will not wait for you. Whether you are a bank, whether you are a telco, whether you are whatever, it doesn't matter. The bigger you are, typically, the slower you will be. So what was your competitive advantage can now become a curse. So how can we change that for organizations? Now, have any of you seen, obviously I can't see all of your faces on the short profile screen that I'm looking at, but is this something that you'd heard of, this statement before being made? And does it fit with what you do? You download an app on your phone, you try it, you don't like it, you uninstall it. We don't even think twice, right? But you have just uninstalled a company. Quite amazing. So the power is in the customer today. There's just so much choice. With digital services, the barrier to entry is super low. So it's not about being the biggest and the cheapest anymore. So we kind of get a sense of urgency, which is really the point of the first section, is to give a sense of urgency. We have to become a fast fish. If we don't become a fast fish, we're out of the game. But just accepting that reality doesn't mean that you can now do it. There's going to be a number of challenges that you may face. The first challenge is about being customer-centric in the middle. And you may have seen that type of diagram before as Simon Sinek's golden circle, start with why. So this has been modified slightly because before you can understand why, you need to think about who. But Simon Sinek's real message within his golden circle concept is that a lot of companies are designed around shareholder wealth, right? Maximizing the wealth of shareholders. And if that's how you are designed, then all of your strategies will be around profit maximization, right? That's what you'll be focused on. How can I cut costs to show good profit? How can I increase revenue to show good profit? So you'll be constantly be driven by numbers, but you'll forget why you are in business in the first place. So the whole idea behind being customer-centric is that you understand and can define what the customer's goal is, right? I'll give you an example of this. In Singapore, and in every country in the world, you have your national taxi companies, right? In London, you've got black cabs and things like that. So in Singapore, there's a taxi company, and their vision, their objective is to be the #1 in the world. And you think to yourself, how many times have you wanted to get a taxi and thought to yourself, now who's #1? I better give them a call. Has that ever entered your mind? It is something totally meaningless to a customer. Hi, I'd like a taxi home. Well, before you pick me up, are you #1? Who cares? But you can see in that instance that that particular organization has an objective of chasing some type of award, some type of internal recognition, but have completely lost sight on what the customer wants to achieve. Now, let me give you an example of Uber. Whether they're an amazing company or not, their vision was quite good, at least their initial vision. To make transportation as reliable as running water everywhere for everyone. So if you think about that contrasting vision, in Uber, reliability plus accessibility. As a customer, that's what you want, right? That's going to turn up. You can call them from wherever you are and get picked up. Versus we're going to be number one. Now you can ask yourself, do you really understand what is your customer's number one? Their goal, right? Do you know your customer's goal? Does it just roll off the tongue? And if it doesn't, then you're probably not as customer-centric as you might think you are. But the companies like Uber, they will design their products and services around those two goals. Now, goal number one was reliability. Goal number two was accessibility. They will make sure that all of their investments align with those two goals, so that then they can say to their customer, we hear you, and here's what we offer you. So when it comes to what we offer you, this is where we start thinking about the new technology that brings various challenges. You know, if we want to have in machine learning, and we want to have in all the data science technologies, do we need blockchain? Does anyone need Bitcoin? But if you're going to be building new products and services on new technologies, because it's unproven, you do not want to do one-year projects for unproven technologies. So you want to build, products and services that are designed through concepts that you'll know from, the agile software development world, that minimum viable product concept. So products that you can build fast and that can fail fast and that you can learn fast. Paul Sims, do reliability and accessibility mean different things to different customers? They might do, Paul Sims, if you're in Toronto. But accessibility should mean that it doesn't matter if you are anywhere in Canada or anywhere in the USA, you can use the app. Whereas reliability is the driver is actually going to show up and the car is actually going to get you to where it should be able to get you to. So accessibility more about the app working geographically wherever you are within obvious limits, and reliability that they do actually show up and take you to your destination. So new technology, not every product or service, even agile ones, need new technology. So it is something we need to think about. But if you are going to use the latest technologies, because nobody is an expert, don't put your whole life savings into anything, right? You want to build something that you can try with your customers and experiment towards success. Yeah, you're right, Paul, that acceptance criteria must be specific and measurable. So when you're setting goals, this is one of the things you would need to do. You would need to make sure that it is an achievable goal. And it is possible that people have different interpretations of even the same language, as we all know, for our English-speaking relatives around the world. So who and why, customer goal. The what is, what are the products and services that we're building? Now, when business agility really helps is on the how. So moving from traditional, lengthy, quite presumptive projects to business agility practices, which can, I guess, support your customer's goal of delivering value quickly. And we'll have a look at those business agility practices. I'm sure you've all come across that term VUCA now many, many times. aside from the market challenges, which affect everyone in the market are affected by those 3 challenges, right? Getting hold of customers to understand the customer's goals, the challenges of new technology, and just the challenges of being in that VUCA environment where things change all the time and we end up with COVID, and that affects everyone. But depending on the organization, you may face these 7 internal challenges. There may be more than 7, but we picked the 7 common ones. Resistance to change. Resistance to change, we think, well, why would someone resist a change? Usually because they don't see what's in it for me. So in a large organization, strategy is set from the top with very little engagement with anyone else. And then that strategy is then forced upon the employees. And if the employees accept it, then okay. If they don't accept it, then we need to call in some consultants. And so it's okay to call in the consultants or the organizational change managers to help deal with the resistance to change without actually understanding why resistance to change exists in the first place. Nobody will resist something they see as good. People only resist things that they see as bad. So logically, having someone else repeat the same message in their ear is not going to change anything. Whether it's an organizational change manager or it's a consulting firm, it's not going to change anything. Now you can apply KPIs and try and force change, right, through punishment, through carrot and stick. But you're not going to get the blood, sweat, and the tears, the passion. People will just do what they're supposed to do. Functional silos. Functional silos was an unintended consequence of the value chain concept. I don't know how many of you remember the value chain concept, but about dividing your organization into specialisms, that we have a inbound logistics and an outbound logistics, and we have procurement, and we have a finance, and the competitive advantage. It's 1980s management theory, but the competitive advantage is gained through specialism. Yeah, look, fine. If our marketing department is better than your marketing department, then we have an edge. The downside is, right, remember everything has a downside, is that as we compartmentalize specialism, we start to create silos. People only think about their specialism, and we lose sight of the big picture. And people start saying things like, it's not me.
Just talking about silos, Jamie, Paul has an observation there around leaders want to build empires because of how they're compensated, and measurement systems need to change. Very much so.
So, around that management by objective, another 1980s theory, isn't it, Paul? Mm-hmm. What is the goal that we're setting? So if we're setting customer goals, then those leaders have to achieve the customer goals to get rewarded. But if you're setting internal departmental KPIs, then of course, logically, that's what they're going to focus on, right? Driving down cost within their department, or driving up throughput within their department, or whatever, but it's very compartmentalized change. So silos are a problem, especially in large organizations. Multitasking is a problem. We've got our juggler there. Multitasking is a problem because it's a myth. That's been proven, and you would know yourself, you cannot do 2 things at once. Even the person that comes into the meeting with their laptop open and says, yeah, I'm listening, tapping away on the keyboard, yeah, I'm listening. Then we ask them a question, and they say, sorry, what was that? Right, so multitasking, the division of labor, is logical. If you have 8 hours in a day, why can't I divide those 8 hours and give you 8 tasks that are 1 hour long? Right? Because if you do that, when the phone rings, where does the time come from? And when the email pops up, where does the time come from? And when someone pats you on the shoulder, where does the time come from? And when someone says, come to a meeting, where does the time come from? So the problem with multitasking was more that people were too optimistic about the division of time and tried to divide 100%, when really you should probably divide 80%. and leave a bit of buffer. But then maybe to Paul Sim's point, if you start leaving buffer, those management gurus are going to start saying, oh, that's where we can drive efficiencies with those buffers. Anyway, bottlenecks we talked about, we saw the example. Mindset. Mindset is an interesting one. It's not the same as number one. The meaning behind this number 5 mindset is just you, the way you see the world. So if I came from IT and I'd spent 20 years in IT, then I see the world in a certain way. It's not possible for me to see the world in the same way as someone who spent 20 years in finance or 20 years in marketing. So a lot of the mindset issues that we face is that people have an opinion upon a certain decision or direction, and they are correct from their perspective. But the other people who are in disagreement are also correct from their perspective. So everybody is correct, but all of our perspectives are different because we all see the world different. So what do we do? Maybe that's where the boss comes in and makes a decision for us. The internal challenge of people management. What we're talking about here is rewards, recognition, this kind of punishment, carrot and stick. There's a bank in Singapore, I'll give you this example. Bank in Singapore, where it is forbidden to make a mistake. If you make a mistake, then you have failed your KPI. If you fail your KPI 2 or 3 times, then you don't get your bonus. Now you kind of think, well, yeah, okay, makes sense from maybe a quality perspective. We're trying to drive high quality, make sure people don't do garbage work. They really think about it. But we're kind of also saying that it's forbidden to be a human being, because all human beings learn through making mistakes. And we have now said that you can't do that anymore. So what's going to happen? People are going to make mistakes because they're human. They're going to sweep it under the carpet. If they sweep it under the carpet, then we can't learn, so we don't progress. Or they're not going to try very hard. They're going to stay within their comfort zone. And then we're not going to progress anyway because no one's trying anything new. So, and what I was saying, that's why we know that extrinsic motivation doesn't work, only intrinsic in the long run. Yeah, and it's people's own responsibility to be motivated. Look, I agree with you. The issue that you may face, and it depends on which part of the world you come from as well, is that in some parts of the world, people are conditioned to take instruction. And if you take that instruction away, that doesn't now give them, this angelic moment where their wings come out and they start to flap and, now I'm a mighty eagle. They may shrink and hide and get scared. I don't know what to do. So, we're kind of talking about in the box versus out of the box thinking. In some cultures, that's really conditioned and really hard to change. In other cultures, people would love for the managers to step back and give people some more room to move. But another aspect of people management is this kind of annual thing, annual performance appraisal. Can you remember what you did last year? Can you remember what's in your performance appraisal? What did you say you would achieve? I think for a lot of people, a week before they have their performance appraisal, they quickly log onto the system, realize they've forgotten the password, have to get a password reset, finally get into the system, and they go, wow, I said 20 things. Wow, okay. What's my list of excuses? And it just becomes a formality. But that formality is taken very serious, right, by HR and people within those circles, who then start to allocate training and all this and that. Within a VUCA world setting, though, it's very difficult for anyone to say what training you need today when you don't know what's going to happen next week. So how can I plan for what courses people are going to achieve over the next year? We don't even know what's going to happen next month. So there's a lot of challenges there for people management that come up. Certainly around the rewards, the recognition. And the budgets, absolutely. Yeah. So budgets are an issue. Who's got the budget? What can we spend it on? Oh, this is the training that I need. Oh, you can't have that training. You can't have the training that you need. You need to have this package that we bought. But that sucks. Yeah, but that's the one that we've got. That's not going to drive your business forward. Now, the last one is a challenge that should never, ever be a challenge, because it's a constant. It's like saying that we have an internal challenge of oxygen. Why do we have an internal challenge of time? Not enough time. If there's 8 hours in a day and you're only contracted to work 8 hours a day, why would there be an issue of time? In some parts of the world, this is policed quite well. I hear in France that there's various labor laws around you cannot work beyond your scheduled working hours. These things don't exist in Asia. If your boss wants you to work, you work. When it comes to the challenge of time, if people are overworked, then you can't expect the best quality from them. Mistakes will start to happen, quality will start to suffer, people will start to get burnt out. It's going to bring the performance of your business down at a time when you want high performance, because you need to deliver value faster than your competitors. Trying to do that with burnt out staff is going to be very, very difficult. Are these sort of challenges things that you've seen in your working career? I'm always saying, read the book Beyond Budgeting. Okay, I didn't know there was a book. I'd heard of the concept. Now, challenges. Let's talk about the framework and how it helps. So there's no point designing a framework that is heavy, because if the framework is heavy, it's going to slow you down. And we're not trying to be slowed down. We're trying to be a fast fish. So the framework is what we call a minimum viable framework. Minimum viable framework simply means that it has just enough controls. Too many controls, you'll be a slow fish. Too few controls, and you'll be out of control. So you've got to try and find this right balance between what is too much and what is too little. So that's where the minimum viable framework idea comes from. There's 4 dimensions or 4 parts to the framework. There's a goal that gives us direction. There are roles that we call enablers, and there are 3 of those. Those enablers give us the commitment to achieve the goal. There are 7 rules. So we're not without governance in business agility. There is governance, so there's 7 rules. And there is action for the enablers. So each enabler has work that they need to do. So Paul says, pull work, don't try to push work. Yeah, it's definitely one of the concepts that's very, very common nowadays. So that kind of just-in-time concept that we know about with Kanban and with Scrum, and just-in-time concept. Kanban, famous from Toyota, but Toyota got it from supermarkets. You think supermarkets, they really need to have just-in-time, because if they have too much inventory, it's going to perish and they're going to have to throw it away. So definitely these sort of concepts come into the framework. This is what the framework looks like on a page. I will quickly go through the sections, but when you go to the website, businessagility.works, this is what you will see in front of you, and you can click the various components and you can read more about the framework. So the website itself is designed to be a book of sorts. So the course is based around the content that you can see on the website, and the exam is based on the content. And with having a book online, it can be an agile product itself. So that as soon as we get feedback from the customer around, can you explain this more? Can you add more here? Can you remove this or change that? It's very easy to do if it's a digital product. The goal, maximize customer value quickly, consistently, and sustainably. Make sure that the goal is customer-centric. And the framework itself, the whole thing, is applied per product or per service that your company offers, whether your customer is internal or external. So they could be internal services that finance is providing to stakeholders within the company, or it could be an external service that is for customers outside that pay. But wherever they are, internal or external, we have to maximize value for them quickly, consistently, and sustainably. And those are the 3 targets that we define within the framework. Now, there's no one way of applying the framework, because what product or service are you going to apply it to? We don't know. So we give some guidance around what does quickly mean. And the main time target is end-to-end. So from the customer to the customer. And the measurement that we've given the abbreviation of time to value, right? Because it's maximize customer value quickly. So what is the time to value? So from the time a customer asks for something, whether it's to onboard, whether it's for support, whether it's for a request to change, whether it's to cancel or exit or whatever it might be, from the time that they ask, you start the clock, and the time that we put it in their hand and they start using it. So not just put it in their hand and then finished. We put it in their hand and they start using it. So now it has value, then the clock stops. So that is time to value. Within the company, the time may be chopped up. So there's time to go in a backlog and time to build and whatever. That's fine, but the customer doesn't care about those micro measurements. So the ones that we've focused on in support of the goal is what is the end-to-end time target. For consistency, there's a couple of ways you can look at consistency. Usually quality, which might be defined in many different ways, like capacity and availability, etc. And throughput or productivity. Do you factor in cost of delay? You would definitely want to consider cost of delay in terms of what it means. So in the section of in the course that describes the framework, we talk about you're fast, but so what? We saw this in IT. You have a software development team that moves to 2-week sprints. So what? What does that matter? We know that we've spent X amount of money in terms of training and reconfiguring the organization to achieve 2-week sprints, but so what? Do we have more customers now? Has our net promoter score gone up? Or, what we were trying to achieve as a business? How has that changed as a result of that time target? So for cost of delay, Paul, this would be one of the things we would want to consider. Do we have to have 2-week, or does it have to be 1 week, or does it have to be 1 minute? I mean, I do talk in training about things like IT support. Is it feasible? Is it practical even to fix or replace someone's desktop within 60 seconds? And people usually laugh and they say, no, why would we give that as a time target? I'm going to replace your desktop in 60 seconds. Well, how long do you think it should be? Oh, maybe an hour? Okay. So you go and tell a trader who's gambling hundreds of millions of dollars that they need to wait 1 hour for their machine that's broken down, and see how long you live. So these targets, right, cost of delay is going to be very contextual. What's the industry that you're in? What does that delay actually mean? And should it be 1 minute, or should it be 1 hour, or should it be 1 day? Or, we have to look into that. For sustainably, we may be thinking sustainably, environmental impact. That's definitely one of the measurements we may consider. But there's also sustainability from a financial perspective. We want to make sure that we're building things, if it's profit driven, that we actually can make profit. If it's not for profit, then at least we can cover our costs and put a little bit of money in the bank for tough times. We can also look at sustainably from a resilience perspective. So can the business continue if this product or service is down? You know, how resilient is it anyway? Is it a real fragile product and therefore our company is fragile? And organizational impact is looking at, does this product fit within the company? Because we may have built something, but it's the culture of that product clashes with our company so much that even though it's successful, it can't live here. So we may have to spin it off, sell it off, or maybe spin it off into a new entity. Ideally, we want it to fit in like a jigsaw puzzle with all of our other products and services, and we have reuse of assets and maybe sharing of resources, or at least resources that can move around. So those three targets, quickly, consistently, and sustainably, they're quite high level, quite broad categories really of targets. And then for each product or service, we need to zoom in and say, okay, well, within the context that this product exists, what is the right speed targets? And again, within the context that this product exists, what are the right sustainability targets? Once you have the goal and it's achievable to the earlier point, everything else around how should we be set up, how should we be configured, where should we sit becomes very obvious. You know, if you said to me, Jamie, can I have a virtual team? Can I have, you know, resources in China, India, and the USA? I would say, well, what's your speed targets? Oh, we have to provide support within 1 minute. I said, well, no, obviously you can't have people in India and China and USA if you've got such a target. So we're not asking those sort of questions in advance. Can I still have my virtual teams? We're coming up with the goal first, and then our composition, whether it's technology composition, people composition, processes, etc., becomes much easier because now the goal is explicit. This is quite different from a lot of previous Agile frameworks where, you know, you kind of pick a target like 2 weeks or 1 week, and then you just do it, but without actually saying for what, why, what was the value at the end of the day. So that's really what the goal is trying to get to, the who and the why aspect. If you have many products and services, you may end up with a multi-speed business. That is perfectly fine, because different services may operate in different contexts, even within the same organization. So from a banking perspective, there will be core banking systems that are under the regulation of some Ministry of Finance within an organization. Because they're under heavy regulation with penalties for being down and you know, penalties for losing customer data, then you would expect that the goal is optimized for higher predictability, right? Or sometimes called higher stability, but more higher predictability. And that's okay. So we would have time targets, we would have quality targets, sustainability targets designed around that context, which is we must be more predictable, right? So we accept that we're going to be a slow fish, but we're going to pass regulation. On the flip side, we've got another product or service which is going to change every single day. It's in a very VUCA environment. There's lots of competition out there. This product or service has a very different goal, needs to be a fast fish. Whilst this sort of diagram may, you know, it shows that the framework is applied per product or per service. So it's easy enough then to have an individual goal for each product or service. The difficulty that you face in real life is of dependencies. So if that website service is dependent upon the core banking service, then it doesn't matter how fast the goals are for the website service, they're always going to be constrained by their weakest link. Right? So this is, I guess, when we set the goal and we ask ourselves, is it practical? We need to think about the dependencies that we have with other teams. Because we don't want to end up like in the previous slide where we have a very fast agile software development who are then dependent upon a very slow IT operations. Ross is saying the change in culture is going to be the biggest challenge. How can you implement when people are rewarded for being a big fish and not a fast fish? You're absolutely right, Ross. Now I will show you how we are trying to do it. Okay, this particular slide is talking about if you have lots of products and services, let's say you have 50 products or services. Do you want to have 50 goals? Probably not. It's probably going to be excessive. So what you can do is categorize and say, we've got 3 operating models or 4 operating models, and you are either operating model A, B, or C, right? And whatever product or service we operate fits within one of those categories. Now, on to the point about mindset and especially leaders. Look, Agile Frameworks, the original ones, were for Agile software development teams. Very specific, Agile software development frameworks for Agile software development teams. But it doesn't work at the organization level. For example, let's take one of the very famous Agile frameworks, software Agile frameworks, which was Scrum, which still is Scrum. Scrum has the role of Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is supposed to help the team remove impediments. So the Scrum Master, with their list of impediments, goes to the business leaders and says, here's my list of impediments. And the business leaders say, go away. Now you can't do your job. Now the framework isn't working the way that it's supposed to. So we've been very cautious in the way that we designed it and saying that if you're going to set a goal that has such huge impact upon the entire organization, you cannot put the realization of that goal upon a team or even upon a few teams that are connected somehow, because there will be leaders that will be involved, because the leaders have the power by default. And not just internally, but even the customer side, whether it's an external customer or internal customer, they can also affect our ability to achieve that goal. So what we're saying here, Paul, is that if you go down the path of business agility, you cannot use the framework properly with just an agile team. If you just have an agile team, the best you can hope for is team agility. Now, we've defined business agility as customer agility plus team agility plus leadership agility. You must have all 3 if you're going to have business agility. So if you're serious about being a fast fish, and if you see that the framework is a way for you to get started on your journey to become a fast fish, you have to have the commitment from everyone. Whether you're on customer side, team side, or leader side, you have to take part. Now, as an example of that, for an internal service, we could have like an HR service. So someone from HR represents the employees. So maybe we've got an HR service owner. And that service owner works with the employees, who's the internal customer, to understand what do the employees need from this particular HR service. We've got the HR team members, who's the team. They design, build, and operate the services. And then we've got the leader, who has the default decision-making authority, who might be the HR director, for example, or in some companies, the COO. All 3 of those stakeholders need to work together, 1, 2, 3, to achieve the goal. So we've got customer agility plus team agility plus leader agility. For an external product, same thing. We've got some type of owner representing customers. We have the team itself. The team in business agility, we tend to look for teams that manage end-to-end. So they're not just development teams like you might find in other software frameworks, right? That are just about developing and putting code into production, but then once it's live, it's not our thing. In business agility, it's end-to-end. So whether it's a development value stream, or it's a support value stream, or it's an onboarding value stream, or offboarding value stream, we want the team to be able to do as much of those value streams as possible. whether it's one team or, you know, a number of connected teams. The leader in this external product may be a portfolio manager. So a portfolio manager who has a portfolio of products, has the budget that they allocate across the various products and services, makes the decisions on which ones we keep and which ones we kill, but represents always, the agile leader represents who has the decision-making authority. Because the leaders enable the teams enable the customers enable the teams enable the leaders, and vice versa. So that is how we're addressing the leaders, Paul, who aren't willing to roll up your sleeves. If you're not willing to roll up your sleeves, then forget about it. Go and do something else. So that's 2 of the 4 dimensions, or the 4 parts of the framework. The third part is the rules. So the rules, and this is just an example of one of the rules. This is rule number 1, realize a shared vision. It sets governance. So it's a very clear rule, and it says if you are part of the business agility journey, if you're on the customer side, the team side, lead side, this is what we're trying to achieve under rule number 1. So under rule number 1, we're trying to make sure that we co-create our direction, because if we co-create direction, we increase buy-in. If we increase buy-in, what goes down? Resistance to change. And the more buy-in you have, the less resistance to change you have to deal with. So it's realize a shared vision. The rules, the 7 rules, the number 7 came up before, and that was the internal challenges. So those rules were specifically chosen because they help to, in some way, address the internal challenges. So realize a shared vision helps with resistance to change. Realize value quickly is helping us to focus on a task at hand and execute that task and get it finished without juggling too many tasks at once, but finishing nothing. For the internal challenge of mindset and everyone being right, and who's going to win, who shouts loudest maybe, we try to deal with this by using the data that we collect and the conclusions that we can draw that are common from that data. For people management, we're not looking for annual things, we're looking for continual things. And for time, the division of time, particularly time for learning and time for having fun. For those of us who've been working for 20+ years, you may remember there was a time when we had fun in work, paid. They would pay us to join a festivity at 4:30 on a Friday or something like that. For whatever reason, these sort of things have tended to die out. The good old days, Paul, yes, indeed, the good old days. So in business agility, we try and bring those things back, because if you burn people out, they're going to leave, you're going to have high attrition rates, you're going to be losing knowledge, you're going to have unmotivated people. So for the longevity of the company, we want to keep people in, we want to keep people happy, we want to keep people motivated. That will only happen if we allocate the time. So the good old days should just be the good days. We remove the old, we make it relevant again. For the agile value streams, this is kind of zoom in now on the bottom section of the framework. This is the practices, the work, the action that we expect people to do. Now, because you mentioned leaders, I'm just going to look at the leader circle. If you are an agile leader and you're helping to increase business agility to give us the competitive advantage of being a fast fish, you must do these 7 things. We must co-create the direction for the company. No more forcing things down on people. We must maximize autonomy of teams and empower them as much as possible. Even though empowerment of teams means disempowerment of leaders, we must still do it to achieve the goal. We need to remove team roadblocks. They sit in positions of influence, positions of power. Those impediments, those roadblocks, those hurdles, the leaders are in the best position to help to address those. They help to look for organization waste and reduce it. So a product team or a service team is going to be focused on a product or a service. So they're not going to see everything that's happening in the company. But the agile leaders need to have a mechanism for how they can look at waste and say, you know what, this is happening here, here, and here. Now, within each team, it's not such a big deal, but when I look at it across the whole company, it starts to add up. So we need to look at how we can optimize or minimize that waste as much as possible. Agile leaders should still be in a position to make strategic decisions, but as much as possible, the tactical decisions, the operational decisions should be pushed down to the teams. But the agile leaders are still in a position of leadership. We're not, completely disempowering leaders. Leaders need to ensure resilience of the organization. One real challenge is if you upset a product team, let's say somehow they get upset, and there's 6 people on the team or there's 10 people on the team, they all get upset. And so they all resign. What happens to the continuity of that product or service? It's basically gone. So for the leaders, they need to make sure that we have resilience within the organization. It does not mean segregation of duties. That is not the answer. That's the old answer. All right. It is, as Paul mentions, it's about having the right amount of trust, not being silly and saying, oh, I close my eyes, I completely trust you. Having the right amount of trust, but still having controls in place to say, look, this is the minimum governance that you must comply with. You must have some type of architecture documentation. You must have some type of standard operating procedures. You must have some type of this and some type of that. So they're kind of designing the minimum controls that we need for organization resilience, but without locking everything down with segregation of duties and compartmentalization and all those kind of traditional techniques that slow us down. And the final activity for agile leaders is that they have set the time for everyone to come together at various points in time throughout the year to work on those organization problems together. Not just, yeah, we will do this. We will do this on April 30. April 30 blocked out. We've already told the customer we're closed on April 30. So the commitment comes in, right? So we expect the leaders to actually complete these things. Now, the color coordination is important. Apart from being a pretty rainbow, it's important because each color represents what we call an agile value stream, internal value stream from the customer to the customer. So if you look at something like the red one there at the very top, so the customer defines their needs and desires. They work with the agile teams to co-create those needs and desires and put it into a product vision. With the product visions, they work with the leaders to co-create the organization vision to make sure that all the product visions and the organization vision and everything aligns. So all of the work flows from the customer, and then in return, there is the value. So this is kind of like the zoomed in version just for the red that you saw on the screen there. So defining customers, defining the needs and wants, the team co-creating the product or service vision, depending on what the team does, and then the leaders making sure that there's alignment between what all the teams are doing and what the company is trying to achieve. Everything is co-created. Because everything is co-created, resistance to change is gone, or at least significantly reduced. Therefore, at the bottom, this is the value of the value stream. We don't have to have all the governance anymore because we all co-created a vision. Doesn't mean we have no governance, but we don't need all the governance that we had before because everyone understands how they contribute to the direction of the company, to the direction of the product or service. So that is a value stream. Round and round and round and round we go. Positive reinforcing loop. Now, the positive reinforcing loop is very important, because when the stakeholders who are in a partnership, this is drawn as that infinity, the stakeholders enable, and that's why they're called enablers, they enable one another. So the customers enable the teams enable the customers. But the teams are enabled by the leaders. So if one of those stakeholders doesn't play their enabling role, then we don't have at the bottom. Business agility equals customer agility plus team agility. If the leaders are not playing the game, then we don't have business agility. So whoever doesn't play the game, you bring the whole thing down. So business agility is really looking for everyone to be a part, not just the Agile team itself. I mean, how does that sit with you and what you've seen with, getting Agile within your organizations? Is it something that you've felt maybe, whether it's leaders or it's on the customer side or it's another team, things weren't progressing because they didn't see how they were part of it? Oh, Agile is just for software development. Yeah.
So please feel free to get involved and go off mic and talk to us about various examples you may have.
Yeah, feel free. Okay, now you can look at the framework in more detail. Within the framework, within the training foundation level, we talk about the 5 steps to implement the framework. The framework is per product or per service to enable a multi-speed business. So number 6, you don't always need number 6, but the first 5 steps are always repeated. So what is the product or service that needs to be more agile and why? Then once we understand what product or service we're talking about, we can think about who are the enablers. In terms of who is the customer, who's the team, who's the leader, you may not get it right first time, but at least you need to get people into a room. Because if you don't have the enablers, you can't move on to step 3. The goal, maximize customer value quickly, consistently, and sustainably, those targets must be defined by everyone, because they can only be achieved if everyone works together. So the enablers come together, customer teams and leaders, we've got their commitment. If one of those stakeholders doesn't show up, you already know it doesn't work. You already know. There is no step 3. So if you can't get the customer representative in the room, or you can't get the leadership representative in the room, you already know that business agility has failed. Not going to go anywhere because you don't have the commitment up front. So the enablers are very important to show the commitment. So we get the enablers in the room. You can show the first part of the presentation where we kind of give the doom and gloom and try and set a sense of urgency. You get everyone in the room, and then you go through defining the goal. Once you have the goal in mind, then you can start doing some type of current state assessment, which is baselining your level of agility. There is a template that you can use on the website. You can download that for free. There's a link you just download in this section of the website. And then we need to think about, okay, we understand that we've got 7 rules and 7 value streams. Which ones do we need to focus on first? Do we need to focus on realize a shared vision, or is our vision okay? We don't have much resistance to change. We already have buy-in, so we can say that one is green. Maybe we need to focus on, I don't know, something else. Maybe minimize waste or some other part of the rules first. Step number 6 is more for companies where they're going to implement business agility framework across many products and services. And if you have that, then you may want to have a business agility center of excellence. So a business agility center of excellence would be like it sounds, like any other center of excellence. So it helps to drive business agility practices, providing support services, providing assurance services to the enablers to help them perform their role better. So number 6 depends on how big you are as a company. You know, a large bank, like HSBC, for example, it would make sense like a large bank has a business agility center of excellence because they want to have some consistency across all their product and service teams. For a smaller organization that has 2 or 3 products or 2 or 3 services, then they may not need step number 6, but 1 to 5 will always be there.
I have a question.
Sure.
To me, it seems like there's still something missing, or maybe I just misunderstood where you're placing people, because in a larger organization, in an enterprise, you usually have, in addition to the customer and the team and the leader, you have external parties that are not really your customer, like vendors and interfaces. Yep.
They're part of the team.
One of those 3?
Yeah, they're part of the team. So yes, so Sheila, in the framework, it doesn't matter where you sit. You know, you sit within HSBC, you wear an HSBC t-shirt, or you're from an external vendor, but you're working on a product or service, so therefore you're part of the team, wherever you're sat. Now, we talk about things like, well, if you rely on vendors, if you're heavily reliant on vendors, then it may impact your goal, right? We can't achieve the goal because of our dependency upon vendors, and we're sprinting and they're, you know, meandering along. It's the same thing as the bottlenecks in the earlier part of the presentation. So if those vendors are not helping you to achieve your goal, you need to maybe change your vendors or maybe bring them in.
Well, you were asking for examples, and I can think of a time where I had a vendor that purported to have the capability to do something that we would otherwise need to build.
Okay.
We'd give them use cases and they'd turn them into, I think they were doing functional and technical requirements. And we'd tell them, no, you've missed about 90% of it. And they'd ignore us and they'd develop the 10% that they understood or modify their existing process. And they'd say, look, see, aren't we wonderful? We did everything we promised to do. And we're like, no, that's not going to serve our purpose. And it was an ongoing battle with them.
So
they were in a sabotage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. They're in a position where they can inadvertently sabotage. Of course, they're not trying to be your enemy, but they're working to a scope of work, right? They're working to a scope of work. Now, when you define a scope of work, you're being presumptive. You're presuming what the customer wants. Maybe the customer's even told you, but you're being presumptive that the customer's not going to change their mind. One of the guidance could be in this section is that maybe the way we engage customers in this particular scenario may want to be a bit different. Maybe we don't want them the vendor to develop solutions in their company and then just hand them over. They tell us they've got the capability. We go, great, here's your seat.
They weren't the only ones working on it, and it was an existing business process that we were trying to take from a manual physical contact process into an e-commerce process. So we knew what the process was. We knew what the customer needed or wanted based on what the existing business process was. But we had a vendor that was supposed to be delivering a piece of that, and it was a key piece.
Yeah, and they overpromise and underdeliver. This is quite normal, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they didn't listen was the biggest thing. When we'd go back and say, no, that's not what we asked for, that's not what we gave you in terms of the scope of work, they really weren't listening to what we said we needed. Eventually the project got canceled, and it would have been a very good project. They did go forward with a different option without that vendor.
Okay. Then, yeah, I guess lesson learned there for the vendor. I know in Singapore, one of the government agencies, they had vendors that, you know, would say they can deliver the moon, and obviously they couldn't. And what they did is they said to the vendors, look, because these vendors were doing software development. And so they said, look, you're just using a machine. We don't want you to be sat in your company. We want you to be sat here. And so they sat with the internal team. Now you can wear your t-shirt that says whatever company logo on it. It doesn't matter. But you are a member of the team, and we don't engage you for a scope of work. We engage you on time and materials. So you are a teammate, effectively. You're a teammate with a skill set that we don't currently have. And so we just use you as a contractor. It's not always feasible, though. It depends on what the vendor's delivering. But sometimes, Sheila, it's just that lesson learned, isn't it? Don't use them again.
So, and a question from Richard about, I've just lost it now, can't find it. Getting everybody's buy-in on day one is usually achievable and everybody is quite positive, but having everyone continue their involvement through time to value can sometimes be hard and quite rare. How does the framework handle a broken part?
The framework says everything fits under the goal. So I don't care how you're sat today. I don't care what level you're on and who you sit next to, and I don't care about any of that. When you apply business agility, we identify the product. Then we think, well, who's the customer? Who's going to represent the customer? Who's the team? Who represents the leadership? We get them together and we define the goal. That's not yet set in stone, but at least it's something that once we have the goal, when we start talking about organization design and what processes we need and what governance we should have and should we have vendors, all of those questions should be much easier to answer because of the goal. So if your goal was very aggressive in time to value and there's no way that you can achieve it with your current business composition, then it's very obvious your business composition needs to change. Otherwise, that goal is not going to happen. You throw it away. So that you can tell very, very quickly on within the business agility framework whether or not it's going to be successful. Can you get the enablers in a room? If not, you're not going to be successful. Can you get the enablers to agree on the goal? If not, it's not going to be successful. Can you make the organizational changes that are necessary to achieve the goal? If not, you're not going to be successful. So this, everyone's smiling on day one and saying, yeah, let's get it done and da-da-da. And then after that day one period, people kind of filter back to their status quo. Wouldn't happen in business agility because the status quo would have been changed to achieve that goal. As Paul was saying, human bias is over optimism. Yeah. That's true. We are overly optimistic as human beings, definitely. I've had a life in project management, and I can honestly say that all of my project plans were complete BS. But it was optimistic BS. And Paul Sims is saying, Mike Cohn says that if a team is not continuously improving, then it doesn't have an agile mindset. Absolutely. It's learning faster than your competition is a competitive advantage. And then, okay, but only if you've established responsibility individually and in the team. Yes. Step number 2 says assign the enablers. Not invite the enablers to a tea party where we talk about targets. Assign. You are now the agile customer in this context, or the customer representative. You are now the team. You are now the appointed agile leader in this context. So you have been assigned. That means you have been unassigned from whatever you were on previously so that you can be assigned to achieving this goal. I'm being a bit blunt, but you must be if you're going to achieve something. Do you ever make post-mortem analysis? You do. That would happen under rule number 7, learn and having fun together. So it's explicitly part of the framework that time needs to be set for this sort of thing. Sandy needs to go. Thank you, Sandy. But yes, we do post-mortems, or whether you call them retrospectives or lessons learned, or whatever name you would like to give. But yes, explicitly part of the framework. So the Center of Excellence I mentioned, if you've been involved in other movements within the business world, you may have come across centers of excellence before, whether it's a service management center of excellence or a project management center of excellence. So the idea is the same, providing support or providing assurance services to ensure consistency across the organization. You don't always need the COE. It depends on how big you are and how many products and services you will apply the framework to. For the wheel diagram, right? So I went around the 7 things that we want Agile leaders to do. There's also 7 things we want the Agile customers to do and 7 things we want Agile teams to do. Not to say there's only 7 because it's a minimum viable framework. So we say you kind of start with these 7. There may be more you want to add on later on, but you start there. How do I do those 7 things? There is upcoming enabler specific training. So for Agile customers, there'll be a customer agility workshop, Agile leaders, there'll be a leadership agility workshop, etc. So we would have the foundations course, which is online at the moment, whilst we have all the COVID things still going and now mega COVID from the UK. Very nice. So we're going online to start, but foundations will be online or classroom in the future. And the intermediate ones, they will be classroom, virtual classroom, physical classroom, coming later on this year. So if you and your leadership and your customers and you find the framework and you go, okay, that's interesting. I understand about the goal. Now I want to get into my specific value stream activities. You can make it up yourself, using the guidance that's on the framework, or you can get very specific role-based training through those workshops. So they will be coming up. Mola says, how do you get leadership on board? They are the challenge. If they're not on board, how are they leaders? I don't know. Look, sometimes we used to say in consulting, so I have a background in consulting, and we used to say to senior executives, if you can't get the people to change, then sometimes you have to change the people. And, you're just kind of saying, look, you bang your head so many times against the wall, you're going to end up with a flat head. So you've got to let people go sometimes. The same is also true for someone who may be on the customer side, a customer representative, or on the team side. If you can't get the company to change, then maybe you have to change the company that you work for sometimes, right? But we hope that our leaders do want to be a fast fish. They just don't know how. And because Agile has come from IT, they may be intimidated by it. And so business agility kind of detaches itself from anything to do with software. We don't use the Agile Manifesto. We don't teach the Agile Manifesto in any way. We talk about its history, its lineage, and how it helped to evolve into business agility. But we certainly don't focus on software development. So we are hoping that that fresh approach brings more people in, and so that we can deal with those mindset issues, those bottleneck issues. Paul, you have to work your way into a new way of thinking rather than think your way into a new way of working. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it goes down to the goal. It goes down to rule number 1, realize a shared vision. You have to want it. You have to want it. If you want it, then you will put your blood, your sweat, and your tears into making it a reality. If you don't really want it, then what can you do? Not much. So we've reached the end of the session, and I wanted questions as we go through, just because I know that there's a lot of concepts that require your questions as they pop up. But are there any further questions in the last few minutes that you would like me to answer? My contact details are there if you want to get hold of me. Businessagility.works is a product, and So my email is not at businessagility.works. It's at VisionLed.co, but at VisionLed.co is easier to type out, less letters. Or you can get me on LinkedIn as well. Any other questions that you have? No? So if you, go ahead.
No, sorry, that was only me, Jamie. Carry on.
I thought it was you, okay.
Yeah.
Are SAFe and the like an impediment, or does it actually help being agile? Well, SAFe and the like are still looking from a development perspective. So when it comes to value streams, if you look at SAFe as a very specific example, SAFe kind of sees itself in that change the business world, right? The old kind of change the business, run the business kind of mindset. And it states that within their website somewhere that they're on the change the business side of the fence. So does it cause an impediment? Not really. It's kind of like an evolution. So I'd say, look, if you've been implementing SAFe within IT and it's helped to address your IT bottlenecks, then it could be a good precursor, a good stepping stone to say, we've got this movement, we've been using SAFe, and now we want to step out and have a look at some broader value streams that include run the business as well as change the business. But there's no kind of stepping on anyone's toes, or if you choose A, then you cannot have B. There's nothing like that, because at the end of the day, Agile is all, anyone under the Agile umbrella is trying to achieve the same thing, really, which is putting value in your customer's hand as quickly as possible. It's just, are you able to do it end to end, or are you just doing part of the journey?
Okay, thank you. So we have been recording this session, and we will make the recording available via the Agile Business Consortium's YouTube channel. It will also be on the Agile20Reflect Festival archive site as well. So please do go back and have a look through there if anything else crops up. So I'd like to really thank everybody for engaging, and some great questions there, and really thank Jamie for his time and his very thought-provoking presentation, given us lots to go away and think about, and there are all sorts of ways you can follow up with that if you'd like to know more. So thank you very much.